This is your economics video for production possibility, frontiers, and trade. So on your last active learning, you were asked to derive a PPF graph for Japan. And on that graph, you were given the data for how many labor hours Japan had and how long it took them to make wheat and computers. So on your active learning, if you don't have it out, go ahead and get it out. You should have wheat on the vertical axis and computers on the horizontal. You should have figured out that if Japan uses all of their resources to make only wheat, they can make 1,200 tons of wheat. And if they make only computers, it's 240 computers. And then you should draw a line between those 2 points. And that means that anything along this line represents combinations of wheat and computers that they can make. Now, just like we did with the United States graph, I want you to go ahead and get a different colored pen, something different than what you used to draw your Japan graph with. And I want you to mark the point that represents 50% labor hours used on wheat and 50% labor hours used on computers. So here I've put a dot on my line and I've labeled it A. If Japan uses 50% of their labor hours to make wheat, they'll have 600 tons of wheat and 120 computers. This is going to be the amount, and again, I just picked these numbers, that Japan is going to need in order for it to be good to trade with them. Because if on their own they can make 600 wheat and 120 computers, then in a trade they need to get more than this number. Remember, the US's 50-50 point was 2,500 tons of wheat and 250 computers. So in order for a trade to exist, both of these trade partners have to end up with more goods and services than they could make on their own. If it's only good for one trade partner, not the other, then the other country is just going to say no to the trade deal. All right, for your next active learning, you're going to draw these directly onto the graphs you've already made for the United States and Japan. So you don't need to redraw them at all. But I do need you to get out a different colored pen, something that you haven't used on these graphs yet. So for question 1, we're going to suppose that the United States is going to produce 3,400 tons of wheat. So if you draw that on your US graph at 3,400 tons of wheat, if you draw it all the way over to your PPF line and then draw a line down to the computer axes, you need to figure out how many computers the US would be able to make. If they are using some of their labor hours to make 3,400 tons of wheat, how much computers can they make with the remaining labor hours? So you need to figure out that number, and then you're going to mark the dot on the line, part B, and you're going to write in the number of computers the US can make. On your Japan graph, you're going to do the same thing. Suppose Japan makes 240 computers. How many tons of wheat would Japan be able to make? Draw that dot on your graph and label that B.